Liam Callan didn't have time for ceremonies. After 16 months on the front lines, his mind was a muddle of restless exhaustion and a nagging sense of guilt. He'd done his job, clearing trenches, securing supply routes, holding a crumbling line against a relentless enemy. But victory hadn't come cleanly. It never did. The starship Tantalus, a behemoth of Human Command's interstellar fleet, cruised at sub-light speed just beyond the Valexian system's debris field. A constellation of shattered hulls and escape pods tumbled in slow orbits, a glittering, macabre trophy of the human-led coalition's success. Somewhere down there on those fractured planets, millions of Valexians were mourning their dead, patching up their wounded, and cursing the name of humanity. Sergeant Callan. The terse voice of Colonel Hardin snapped Liam out of his reverie. Hardin's broad, stern figure loomed in the doorway of the briefing chamber, flanked by 2 armed guards. "You've been requested." Liam sighed and followed, boots clinking on the polished metal floor. The Tantalus still smelled faintly of disinfectant and burnt circuitry, the aftermath of a close-call firefight that had scorched the lower decks. As they reached the chamber, the doors slid open with a hiss, revealing a room dominated by a massive viewport. Beyond it, the gas giant Moran swirled in pink and gold clouds. Standing beside the view, a small delegation of officers and diplomats chatted in hushed tones. At the center of the room was a figure who instantly caught Liam's attention. A Valexian woman, her posture rigid and her chin tilted defiantly. Her skin was a smooth opalescent silver, glimmering faintly under the artificial lighting. Long, dark blue hair cascaded over her shoulders, streaked with the white bands that denoted a Valexian of high status. Her eyes, a piercing violet, locked onto Liam's with an intensity that was almost unsettling. "Sergeant Callan," Hardin said, stepping forward. "Meet Kyria Anzyra, former envoy of the Valexian High Council." Liam glanced at her, then back at the colonel. "Sir, I don't understand. Why is she here?" Hardin smirked. "Because you've earned her." The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Liam's stomach tightened. "I'm sorry. What, do you mean earned her?" "You're one of the war's standout performers," Hardin said. "Your bravery in the assaults on Elatar Prime and Sidran II saved countless lives. The Valexian's own envoy has been turned over as a prize of war. It's symbolic, a way to show our dominion over their so-called elite. You're being honored." Liam's mouth went dry. He turned to Kyria, who hadn't moved a muscle. Her gaze burned with quiet contempt, her demeanor a study in restrained fury. "Colonel, I can't. This isn't—" He struggled for the words. "This isn't right. I'm a soldier, not a what?" Hardin's voice hardened. "You'll accept this gift, Callan. Refusing it would insult the chain of command, not to mention the diplomats who worked out the terms of surrender. Take her, or you'll be seen as ungrateful." Liam stood there, caught between outrage and duty. He thought of all the times he'd told himself that humanity's fight against the Valexians was about freedom, about protecting the weak. This wasn't what he fought for. But looking at Kyria again, he saw something else. She wasn't begging. She wasn't crumpled in despair. She was strong, unbowed. "Fine," he said stiffly, "if that's an order." "It is," Hardin replied. "She's under your custody now." As the colonel and the other officers filed out, Liam was left alone in the room with Kyria. He hesitated, then stepped closer, his voice low and careful. "Kyria, I'm not going to— you're not— I'll figure out how to make this right." She didn't reply. She didn't flinch. She simply stared back at him, her expression as sharp as a blade. It wasn't hatred, Liam realized, but something deeper. A challenge, a refusal to break, no matter the circumstances. Liam sighed, the weight of his new reward settling heavily on his shoulders. "Let's get out of here," he muttered, motioning toward the door. Kyria remained silent, her steps steady and measured as she followed him. The war was over, but for Liam and Kyria, a new battle was just beginning. A lone outpost hovered on the barren edge of a Valexian moon, its metal walls braced against perpetual dust storms and temperature swings. Liam Callan sat at a makeshift desk in his assigned quarters, staring at a report he couldn't bring himself to finish. Across from him, Kyria Ansira sat in a corner of the small room. Arms crossed, her expression locked into that unflinching mask of defiance he'd come to know so well. Days had passed since the Tantalus had dropped them here, leaving them among a skeleton crew tasked with maintaining order in Valexian space. Liam hadn't asked for this assignment, and he sure hadn't asked for the company. Yet there she was, his reward, his assigned companion, or whatever euphemism command had used to hide what this really was. A human soldier and an alien captive, stuck together on the fringes of conquered territory. The silence was suffocating. Liam finally looked up from his datapad, sighing heavily. "You know," he started, his voice weary, "we could make this less miserable if you'd at least talk to me." Kyria tilted her head, her violet eyes meeting his with a calm that was more unsettling than anger. "And what would you have me say, Sergeant? Shall I thank you for sparing me from the prison camps? Or perhaps congratulate you on receiving a Valexian envoy as a prize of war?" Her words were like needles, sharp and deliberate. Liam leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his short-cropped hair. "Look, I'm not thrilled about this either. I didn't ask for you to be here, but you're not my slave. I won't treat you like that. And yet," she said, her tone cutting, "you do nothing to release me." "I don't have that kind of authority," Liam shot back. "And even if I did, where would you go? The war's over, but it's not like you can just walk back into Valexian space without being arrested by one side or the other." Kyria's gaze didn't falter. "So you see me as a burden? A problem without a solution?" "No, Liam stopped himself. She wasn't entirely wrong. He had no idea what to do with her. Officially, she was under his care. Unofficially, she was a constant reminder of everything that felt wrong about this war. But she wasn't a burden. Not exactly. If anything, her presence had forced him to confront questions he'd never asked before. Questions about duty, morality, and what it really meant to win. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Kyria, I just want to keep the peace here. The last thing we need is another round of fighting." Her expression softened, just slightly, and for a brief moment, Liam thought he saw a flicker of understanding. "You claim you want peace," she said. "But peace is not achieved by conquest. It is built through mutual respect and trust." Liam gave a bitter laugh. "Respect and trust? With the Valexians? After everything that's happened? That's going to be a hard sell." "Then, you might consider starting here," she said, her voice almost gentle. "If you truly see me as more than a slave, prove it. Treat me as a diplomat, as a person of value, and perhaps we can find a way forward." Her words lingered in the air. Liam wanted to dismiss them, to fall back on the soldier's instinct to keep things simple. But he couldn't. She was right. They were stuck here together, and if he didn't start bridging the gap, this stalemate would only get worse. "All right," he said after a long pause. "I don't know how to fix this, but I'll try. For now, just tell me one thing. If you had your way, what would happen next?" Kyria studied him, as if weighing whether or not to trust him with an honest answer. "If I had my way," she said slowly, "my people would no longer be prisoners in their own systems. We would rebuild what you have destroyed, and we would seek peace. Not through subjugation, but through understanding." Liam nodded. "Fair enough. That's a start." It wasn't much, but it was something. For the first time, the oppressive silence between them began to ease, replaced by a fragile, unspoken truce. Liam didn't know where it would lead, but at least they'd taken the first step. The outpost's mess hall was sparsely populated, just a handful of human soldiers chatting over reconstituted rations and weak coffee. Liam sat at a corner table, nursing his drink as Kyria picked at a plate of human field rations, more out of necessity than appetite. She'd taken to joining him here each morning, though she spoke little. It had become an unspoken routine. a kind of neutral territory where neither of them felt quite like enemies. The tension between them, once a constant companion, had begun to soften. But the outpost itself was another matter. The thin atmosphere outside had grown restless, storms whipping across the Valexian moon's surface. Inside, the mood among the soldiers had soured. Rumors of unrest on the nearby planet's surface were spreading. Some spoke in hushed tones about a growing resistance, a scattered network of Valexians who hadn't surrendered after all, who were organizing under the radar. Most dismissed it as propaganda. Liam wasn't so sure. "Kyria," he said quietly, keeping his voice low enough not to draw the attention of nearby troops. "Have you heard anything about this resistance? Do you know who they are?" Her violet eyes flicked up from her plate, studying him. "You assume I'd tell you if I did." "I'm not asking you to betray anyone," he replied. "I'm asking because if these rumors are true, it could get ugly. I've seen how Command handles resistance. It's not pretty and it never ends well." Kyria set down her utensil. "I do know them. I know many of their leaders. Before the war, we worked together. They were colleagues, diplomats, scholars, people who fought not with weapons but with ideas." Liam frowned. "And now they're fighting with weapons. Because your people forced them to," she said bluntly. "Because the treaties you demanded were no more than chains. You call it surrender. We call it captivity." Liam rubbed his temples, the weight of her words sinking in. "If they attack, the outpost will retaliate. That won't just hurt soldiers. Civilians will get caught in the crossfire." "That's exactly what they fear," she said. "But they won't back down. They see no other choice, and I can't say I blame them." He sat back in his chair, staring down at the dregs of his coffee. "What would it take to stop them?" Kyria tilted her head, considering. "A gesture of good faith. An acknowledgement that peace is not the same as domination. And perhaps someone willing to act as a bridge." Her meaning wasn't lost on him. "You mean you." "I mean both of us," she said. "You have the respect of your comrades. I have the trust of those who resist. Together we might convince them to stand down, but only if your side is willing to listen." Liam let out a long breath. "That's a lot of ifs. Command won't approve." "Then don't tell Command," she said, her tone calm but firm. "Act as a man, not as a soldier." Her words struck a chord he didn't want to admit was there. He thought about the chaos he'd seen on other planets, the lives lost when peace talks collapsed and fighting flared up again. If he could stop that from happening here, didn't he owe it to both sides to try? "Okay," he said finally. "I'll talk to them. But if this goes south, it's on both of us." Kyria gave a small nod, her expression unreadable. "Understood." They didn't shake hands or make any formal agreement. It was just an unspoken understanding. They were stepping into dangerous territory together, trying to stop a war that, both of them, deep down, were still fighting in their own ways. As they left the mess hall, Liam felt the first stirrings of hope. It was faint, fragile, but it was there. A tense silence filled the Valexian council chamber, a once magnificent hall now reduced to a makeshift gathering space for the resistance. Liam stood at the edge of the room, his uniform conspicuously human among the flowing multicolored robes of the Valexian leaders. Kyria was at his side, her voice steady as she addressed the group. Her words flowed in Valexian, a language Liam didn't understand but had come to recognize by its lyrical quality and the sharp, decisive way she spoke. Yet the resistance's leadership was fractured. Some of them, older and more pragmatic, considered Kyria's proposal with cautious optimism. Others, younger and emboldened by months of underground defiance, shot Liam cold glares and hurled accusations at Kyria for even suggesting a truce. The room buzzed with barely contained emotion. When Kyria finally switched to the human tongue for Liam's benefit, her tone was clear and unwavering. "Sergeant Callan," she said, turning to him, "you've seen the consequences of war on my people, just as I've seen the effects on yours. Tell them what you told me. Explain why peace is the only way forward." Liam hesitated. He wasn't a diplomat. He wasn't used to being in front of a crowd, especially one that might want him dead. But Kiria's steady gaze pushed him on. "I'm not here to make excuses," Liam said, addressing the room. "I know what we've done. I know what I've done. I can't change that. But I can tell you what I've seen. I've seen settlements burned to the ground, families torn apart. I've seen kids barely old enough to hold a blaster get caught in the crossfire because nobody was willing to stop and talk." He scanned the room, meeting the eyes of the skeptical faces in the crowd. "I don't blame you for fighting back. Hell, if our roles were reversed, I'd probably be doing the same. But this war, it's eating everyone alive. If it keeps going, it's not just going to be soldiers dying, it's going to be everyone. Your people, my people, all of us." There were murmurs among the crowd. Some nodded. Others frowned. One younger Valexian man stood up, his silver skin glinting in the dim light. "And what of your leaders?" he demanded. "Will they treat us as equals? Or will they keep us as servants, as slaves?" Liam turned to Kiria. She stepped forward, her voice cutting through the tension. "The leaders of human command must be confronted with a united front, one that shows we are not broken, but neither are we their enemies. If we meet violence with violence, we prove their view of us correct. But if we stand together, we show them that coexistence is not only possible but inevitable." The young man sat down, not entirely convinced, but less hostile than before. Others whispered among themselves. Liam felt a faint glimmer of hope, but he knew the real challenge still lay ahead. Convincing the resistance to trust him was one thing. Convincing his own command was another. The meeting ended with a tenuous agreement. The resistance would halt any planned attacks, and Liam would return to the outpost to press for negotiations. It was a fragile, uneasy truce, and everyone knew it. Back on the outpost, Liam sat alone in his quarters, staring at his terminal. He had drafted a message to command, outlining the terms of the truce and calling for a formal negotiation. His finger hovered over the send button. Once he sent it, he'd be making himself a target. Command wouldn't take kindly to a sergeant, acting outside the chain of command, much less proposing peace with a group they considered terrorists. The door slid open, and Kiria stepped inside. She had a way of moving silently, her presence always calm but commanding. "Second thoughts?" she asked. "More like every thought at once," Liam said. "If this doesn't work, it will," Kiria interrupted. "It must. You're doing what they won't." Liam glanced at her, seeing not the defiant captive he'd first met, but an ally. "I just hope command doesn't court-martial me before we get a chance to make this stick." "They might," she said, her tone matter-of-fact. "But what's the alternative? More war? More death? You're taking a risk because it's the right thing to do. That's why I stood beside you in that hall. I believe you can make them. Listen." He nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. "All right," he said, hitting the send button. "Let's hope they hear me out." The message went out, and with it, a sliver of hope. Liam and Kiria both knew the road ahead would be rough, but for the first time it felt like a road worth traveling. Together. Days passed, and the silence from command was deafening. Liam spent every waking hour on edge, glancing at his comm unit, waiting for an official response. The outpost seemed to shrink around him, every clanging footstep in the metal corridors, echoing like a prelude to judgment. Kiria, in contrast, seemed unshaken. She remained her usual composed self, even as Liam's anxiety mounted. If she shared his concerns, she never let it show. Instead, she continued to work, drafting plans for a potential summit, refining arguments, and urging Liam to hold steady. "I've seen empires collapse under the weight of their own hubris," she said one night as they sat in the dim light of his quarters. "Your command is no different. They will resist, but resistance is not the same as strength." "Resistance can still get people killed," Liam muttered. "If they reject this outright, it could ignite another wave of attacks. The resistance, we'll see it as a betrayal. They'll fight back, and then command will hit them even harder." Kiria studied him, her violet eyes reflecting the low glow of the terminal. "Then you must prepare yourself. If they refuse peace, what will you do?" Liam hesitated, the weight of her question bearing down on him. What would he do? Disobey a direct order? Defend the very people he'd been sent to suppress? He didn't know. All he knew was that he couldn't stomach the thought of watching more innocent people on either side suffer. The answer came 2 days later in the form of a terse transmission from command. Request denied. Return to standard operations. Any further contact with insurgents will be treated as treason. Liam stared at the message, his jaw tightening. Kyria, who had been reading over his shoulder, simply sighed. So they choose the sword. They're ordering me to stand down, he said, to pretend nothing happened, like we're not sitting on a powder keg. They are choosing a war they can no longer justify, Kyria replied. But what will you choose, Sergeant Callan? Liam didn't answer. Instead, he paced the room, his mind racing. If he obeyed command, he'd be complicit in the inevitable escalation. If he defied them, he'd be branded a traitor, court-martialed, or worse. But every time he thought about following orders, he pictured the faces of the Valexian civilians he'd passed in the settlement, a mother huddling her children close, an elder trying to patch a crumbling shelter. If the resistance struck, those people would bear the brunt of the retaliation. The outpost's alarm suddenly blared. Liam and Kyria exchanged a sharp look before bolting for the command deck. The other soldiers were already at their stations, monitoring incoming reports. A junior officer turned to Liam, her face pale. Sir, multiple detonations reported in Sector 12. Resistance forces have attacked a supply convoy. Liam's stomach sank. The truce was crumbling faster than he'd feared. He turned to Kyria, who nodded grimly. If we don't act now, more strikes will follow, she said. The outpost's commanding officer, Captain Holston, stormed onto the deck. Callan, what the hell is going on? He barked. This resistance you've been so interested in just escalated things. What do you suggest we do now, huh? Liam squared his shoulders. We go back to the negotiating table, Holston scoffed. Are you out of your mind? Command already shot down your little peace proposal. They made it. Clear, no more talks. We hit back and we hit back hard. And then what? Liam countered. We create more widows and orphans? We give them every reason to keep fighting us? If we retaliate, we prove them right, that we're just another occupying force willing to destroy anyone who defies us. Holston's face turned red, his fist slamming against the console. You're way out of line, Sergeant. Then relieve me, Liam snapped. Throw me in the brig. But if we keep escalating, this war will never end. You know I'm right. A tense silence followed. The other soldiers exchanged uncertain glances, caught between their captain and a sergeant who was saying what many of them had been too afraid to admit. Finally, Kyria stepped forward. Captain Holston, she said, her voice calm yet commanding. You have a choice. Prove your strength through restraint, not force. Allow us to speak to the resistance leaders. Show them there is another path. I know their minds, I can reach them, but only if you give me that chance. Holston glared at her, then at Liam. After a long, painful pause, he muttered a curse under his breath. You'd better be damn sure. This works, Callan. One more attack and I won't hesitate. Liam nodded, the weight of the moment settling heavily on his shoulders. He knew there were no guarantees. The resistance might not listen. Command might intervene. The entire situation could blow up in their faces. But if there was even a chance to stop the bloodshed, he had to take it. As he and Kyria left the command deck, she looked at him with something that might have been approval. You chose the harder path. It's the only path that's worth a damn, he said. Together, they prepared for the next step, knowing that what lay ahead was far more dangerous than the battles they'd fought before. The wind screamed across the surface of the Valexian moon, kicking up sharp, glittering grains of dust that lashed against the makeshift tents and shelters dotting the resistance camp. Liam and Kyria arrived at the edge of the encampment under the wary eyes of Valexian sentries. Every weapon pointed their way was a reminder that trust was paper thin, and that a single misstep could ignite another bloodbath. Liam raised his hands in a show of peace, his pulse hammering in his chest. Kyria spoke quickly in Valexian, her tone measured but urgent. The sentries hesitated, then lowered their weapons. One of them gestured for the pair to follow. Is this going to work? Liam whispered. It has to, Kyria replied. Her calm demeanor belied the gravity of what they were walking into. If the resistance leaders rejected her appeal, there would be no second chance. The fragile truce would shatter, and the last shreds of hope would be swept away in the crossfire. The leader's tent was dimly lit by a portable lantern, its light reflecting off the metallic sheen of Valexian skin and the polished components of their advanced rifles. 4 figures sat around a table, their expressions a mixture of suspicion, anger, and something else. Weariness, perhaps, or resignation. Liam could sense the same tension he'd felt in war rooms on human ships, that fine balance between resolve and exhaustion that made even the most battle-hardened leaders vulnerable to doubt. Kyria stepped forward, her voice steady as she greeted them in her native language. Liam stood behind her, an unmistakable outsider trying to appear non-threatening. He couldn't understand her words, but he didn't need to. The sharp intonations and emphatic gestures told him she was pleading her case, presenting a vision of a future not defined by bloodshed. After several minutes of back and forth, one of the leaders, a tall Valexian woman with a scar running across her cheek, turned to Liam and spoke in accented but clear human standard. "Why are you here, soldier? What can you possibly say that we haven't heard before?" Liam hesitated, acutely aware of how much was riding on his response. "I'm not here to make excuses," he said. "I'm here because I know what's coming if we don't find another way. More deaths, more destruction on both sides, and for what? Another few kilometers of scorched land? A few more shattered settlements? I've seen too much of it, and I know you have too." The scarred leader narrowed her eyes. "Words. What makes you think we would trust the words of a soldier who helped burn our worlds?" "You don't have to trust me," Liam admitted. "But you trust her." He motioned to Kyria. "She's one of you, and she's risking everything to be here, to stand between us and another war. If we're ever going to stop this, it starts here. With this chance. If we blow it, there might not be another." The room fell silent. The leaders exchanged looks, a silent conversation that Liam couldn't follow. Finally, the scarred leader spoke again, this time to Kyria. Whatever she said made Kyria nod, her expression unreadable. Kyria turned to Liam. "They will agree to meet with a representative from command," she said quietly. "But only if we can secure a true ceasefire. No more attacks, no more retaliation, and they will need assurances of safe passage." Liam nodded. "I'll get them safe passage. I'll get command to listen. Just give me the chance." The leader frowned but gave a single nod. "One chance, soldier. That is all." The next few hours were a blur. Liam and Kyria relayed the resistance's terms back to the outpost, where Captain Holston reluctantly agreed to provide a small diplomatic shuttle for the meeting. Command's initial response was predictably frosty, but the looming prospect of a prolonged guerrilla war forced them to reconsider. An envoy was dispatched, and the groundwork for talks was laid. When the meeting finally took place, it wasn't glamorous. A rickety table in a neutral zone, flanked by wary guards from both sides, served as the backdrop. Kyria, standing tall and calm as ever, translated the terms and helped guide the conversation. Liam, relegated to the sidelines, watched as both sides grudgingly inched toward an understanding. The negotiations were fraught, the language sharp and the tempers frayed. But for the first time, Liam saw something he hadn't seen since the Wayao. War began, the faint possibility of an end. Not an end born of victory or defeat, but an end born of necessity. A chance to rebuild, however slowly, however painfully. When the meeting concluded, both sides agreed to a temporary ceasefire and a second round of talks. It wasn't much, but it was enough. As Liam and Kyria returned to the outpost, exhausted but hopeful, he turned to her and managed a small, weary smile. "You did it." "We did it," Kyria corrected. Her voice was steady, but there was a softness in her gaze that hadn't been there before. The war wasn't over, not yet, but they had done something more difficult than any battle. They had taken the first step toward peace.